Good morning. And thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Mr. Hammonds and Dr. McIntyre Height, for setting the stage for this conversation. I think what you heard in the previous session is exactly why this conversation matters. Because as we move from idea to implementation is where this gets both exciting and challenging. Having heard the vision, we will now talk about what it takes to build the foundation for tailored learning. How do we ground that vision in systems? Because tailored learning is not a single program or tool, but rather it's a shift in how we think about time, learning, and student progress. And at its core, this shift is from time-based schooling to mastery-based progress, where students advance when they're ready rather than simply when time says they should. But importantly, and as the materials highlight, this only works when systems are aligned across instruction, assessment, policy, and culture. So in this conversation, our panelists will help us do three things. First, make this concrete. What do these shifts actually look like in practice? Second, surface where this gets hard. The cultural and technical barriers, whether that's community understanding of grading, time for teacher collaboration, or calibrating what mastery really means. And third, explore what enables this to scale. And we are in capable hands with this panel, which represents leaders who are coming at this work from different angles: school models, statewide implementation, and system design. With us are Angela Whitford-Noreen, who is the CEO of Second Mile Education and brings more than 20 years of experience designing and scaling alternative, competency-focused models that re-engage students through flexible mastery-based pathways. Rachel Wright-Junio, who serves as director of the Golden Leaf Schools Initiative at NCDPI, where she leads statewide efforts to strengthen outcomes in rural communities through aligned systems of instruction, assessment, and leadership. And Kayla Seiler, who is a research education analyst at RTI International with nearly 20 years of experience in education policy, research, and strategic planning. And she currently supports the implementation and scaling of competency-based education systems. Thank you all for being here. Let's start by grounding this in real examples. And Angela, I want to start with you.
Okay.
You're working in high schools that are designed very differently from traditional models, particularly for students who haven't thrived always in traditional systems. Can you briefly describe how your model is structured, especially around grading, pacing, and student progression? And if helpful, why are your schools able to do this in ways that traditional systems sometimes struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. So for starters, at Second Mile Education, we believe that time should be the variable, learning is the constant, right? We've talked a lot already this morning about that kind of traditional school setting, which is very time-based. Fixed calendar, fixed pacing guides, cohort-based progression. You either keep up or you fall off, right? And that's the student population that we're serving across our network of schools. These are students who are typically undercredited, over age, biggest skill gaps showing up at the very early elementary levels, typically third grade level in reading, fourth grade level in math. And quite frankly, students that are just facing a whole lot of life circumstances that make that time-based model not successful for them. They've already disengaged. So three core shifts for us. Number one, mastery-based grading. You don't move forward until you've demonstrated competency. So we're not going to hide early failures with later growth opportunity or later growth learning. We're not going to proceed with gaps. They're not moving forward until they've demonstrated that they've met the competency. Secondly, individualized pacing. So they're moving at a speed that's appropriate for them, appropriate for their starting pace, and appropriate for their life circumstances, because sometimes they've got to go slower to get where they need to be, and sometimes they've got to move faster because they've met the competency, they're ready to go, they understand it, and life is ready. It's time for them to move. And then lastly, continuous progression. So you don't move forward when the calendar says you move forward. You don't wait until the calendar says you can move forward, right? It's based on when you've met it in a personalized path. So every student in our system is going to come in with, here's the definition of success for you, and that might change as we grow and as we develop and where you want to be. How do we do it? Number one, we take advantage of some flexibility as it relates to charter schools, and we don't need the Carnegie units to award credit, so that's a very helpful component and critical to us being able to do what we do. And then it's just creating a service model that's very targeted to how do we do this well, providing flexibility, making sure that we have a culture where teachers understand that their job is coaching and intervention. And then again, it's not about the cohort. You graduate at this date, at this time, at this age. It's when you've made it happen, then we're going to celebrate you getting across that stage.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, turning to you, your work through Golden Leaf Initiative is happening inside more traditional school systems. Can you talk about how that work is supporting mastery and differentiated pathways for students in middle school math, and what that shows is possible within the existing structures?
Sure. So just to start off, I want to be clear, we're in our first year of implementation, so the first messy year is what I term that. But we have already learned a lot and seen a lot of great growth in the 15 rural middle schools we're currently serving. Those schools are made up of a combination of a cohort specifically focused on shifting towards competency-based learning, and then another cohort that is also making that shift, but they're starting at a baseline level of improving their school culture and climate, and then moving towards a competency-based education model. And so the model that we're actually using is through Marzano's High Reliability Schools Framework, which level 5 of that framework is competency-based education. Level 1 starts with a safe, supportive, and collaborative culture. And kind of at the center of that work is something called proficiency scales. So the proficiency scales, thinking back to what the last panel was talking about, those scales have the competencies that are agreed upon by a district or a state, and then it clearly defines the learning target for each of those competencies. So it's really clear and gives teachers, students, parents a shared language of what every child should be learning in every grade level, in every subject area. And when you hear about it at first, it seems like a big lift, and I won't lie, it can be, it is a lot of work to come together, collaborate around that, determine what kind of the non-negotiables are for each content level, each grade level as well. But what we've seen is through this initiative, we are able to get our teachers and administrators and district level staff a lot of really high quality training on how to develop proficiency scales. We bring them together in, I won't use the acronym, professional learning communities, which are collaborative. I know we have lots of educators in the room, but we call these PLCs. And these are where we come together as a group to discuss what we want students to know, what those key learning targets are, how they're going to assess learning. And so that has been really transformative. I remember the first time I went to one of the trainings on proficiency scales, it was an aha moment, because as a former middle school ELA teacher, I remember struggling so much to get all of the content covered in the time that was allotted to me. So it was like, I was teaching. Okay, we got to take a test. Now I'm going to teach some more. And some of my kids were left behind. Some of my kids were exceeding expectations and needed a little more advanced work. But because I had to cover what I needed to in the time that was allotted to get them over the finish line, that was difficult for me. This kind of flips that on its head, because we're able to say, this is what we're expecting our students to know and be able to do. And we structure it in such a way through this work that teachers and students alike have the time to actually master the content we're asking them to in that particular content area and grade level. And then in terms of personalizing with those scales, the learning targets are outlined very clearly from a building block level of this is what you need to get to mastery, the mastery level, and then the advanced level. So our teachers are able to very easily pinpoint where students are, and it completely changes assessments as well. Like, it's so much easier for our teachers to do in-class assessments and easily observe mastery through formative assessment practices. Students can do performance tasks to show what they know and show that they have mastered certain content. As you mentioned, we are focused on middle school math, which is a critical need in our state. But of course, we had to start small. That's one thing that we've learned, is starting small is really important. And so to introduce the concept of proficiency scales and the work ahead, we actually had many, and this was not my idea, this actually came from one of our lead teachers within this initiative. She introduced the concept of using proficiency scales for behavior expectations. And you know, all middle schools have a mascot, so it was like, this is the warrior way for a student. And so that's how they introduced the concept to the students, because there's also student-facing scales as well. So the students can say, this is where I am, and this is how I know. The teachers know, and so that was an easy kind of way to introduce that concept, because as we know, this is a new way of teaching and learning for all stakeholders involved. So that was a low-risk way to do that. And also, the other thing that I'll mention, because you also talked about this taking place in a more traditional school setting, is that we have not. Now, our schools will have the option to transition to what's known as standards-based grading, which is a little bit of grading reform, but you don't have to do that. And that's kind of what we led with, because people get really nervous when you start talking about, we're going to give them a 1, 2, 3, or 4. We're not giving them an A, B, C, or D, or we're not grading on the 100-point scale. But there are ways to implement standards-based, mastery-based, tailored learning in a way where you don't have to change your grading practices completely. And it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. So what we've really learned is that finding those easy entry points into proficiency scales and providing high quality, not only professional development, but coaching to teachers and administrators is key to kind of making this shift.
Yeah, and starting somewhat small to learn to scale.
Exactly.
Kayla, you're working at the systems level with districts implementing competency-based frameworks. Can you explain how your approach helps schools define competencies, calibrate mastery, and align instruction and assessment, as well as how that systems level work fits into the broader vision of tailored learning?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, Rachel, you set me right up, so perfect. From the work that we've done at RTI, we've worked with the Regional Education Lab Southeast, and it's been almost 10 years now since we established our framework. So you'll see that on the screen. I think you also have it in your handout. But the key drivers for change that we came up with in looking at what we need to do in North Carolina and what were schools and districts doing across the country were structure, culture, teaching, and learning. But the thing that we told them was you didn't flip the switch and change it all at once. You didn't have to do this big, scary thing, as Rachel was just saying. You don't have to turn it all around and tomorrow, okay, we've got all new grades, we've got all new this, we've got all new this, everything is different tomorrow. That's not gonna work, and that's not sustainable, right? So we built this in a way that you could build on where do you start that works for you. So we look at what a school and district is doing and we say, okay, look at our framework. Is structure the right place to start for you? Is that the key thing that you need to change in order to make a difference for your teachers and for your students? Or maybe you've got really good structures in place, but you really haven't gotten to the teaching part. You haven't provided the professional learning that your teachers needed. You haven't worked with them on how they're changing the way that they're teaching. Then maybe that's your place to start. But you can kind of look across the framework and pick what works for you. We also used it almost as a readiness assessment. So that at the school or district level, your leaders could sit down and take the framework and kind of look at each row and say, okay, where are we doing for assessments right now? Is that on the path to more competency, tailored, personalized, or are we still very, very traditional, following, ABCD, bubble in on our answer sheets? We're not giving students different types of assessments. Everything is very traditional and very formal. So you kind of look at yourself. Where are we on this path? Are we not started yet? Are we on our way? And you start to think of that in the same way that you're working with your students. Where are they on this path? Have they started? Are they on their way? Have they mastered it? What's the journey look like? So we really built the framework as a way to help schools and districts kind of look at themselves and say, okay, where am I right now? What is going to work for me to change today? Because the beauty of all of this is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. There isn't a flip the switch, what works over here, works over here, works over here, and we can just turn it all around by tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You have to think about you, where you are, where your school is, where your students are, where your staff is, and importantly, where your community is. That culture piece and knowing how to communicate to your community. All of your parents, they all went to school somewhere, right? So they know, well, I was on the A honor roll, or I was on the dean's list, and they want their students to have the same thing. So if you tell them, we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, well, what does that look like? How do I get on the 4 honor roll? What is that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? If my student gets a 1, what does that mean? Is that the same as an F? You get all these questions, right? Because everyone has their experience of what school was like for them. So it's coming back to, okay, we're gonna do something different. This is what's best for your students. Okay, tell me more. What do you mean by that? What does the research say? What's the evidence base? And so trying to build through, like, what do we have out there that's working? How is this working for other schools and districts in other states? How is it working in North Carolina? How does it align to the requirements that we have? And really building that foundation of trust and understanding, oh, you're gonna help my student move to here, and then when they're ready, they can move to here, and then they can move to here, and we don't have to hold them back, and we don't have to wait. Or if they need more time, they can have more time. You can help them where they are. The teachers are gonna get what they need to help the students be where they need to be, and you start building the trust and the culture that you need to try new things, to move forward, and to really help students, staff, and everybody in the building with the work. So that's why we built the framework. So you can look in the different places. We have establish your standards and competencies. That's part of your structure, right? Setting that work up. Assessments, part of your structure. Sometimes it's as simple as changing who's in charge of the bell schedule, who's in charge of the movement in the building. Can we have learning outside of the building? What does that look like? How do we accept that? But it's just talking through all the different pieces and figuring out, where do we start? And you don't start with all of them. Pick 1, maybe 2 places. That's where you start as a school. Once you feel like you're making progress, you move to the next one. Once you feel like you're making progress, you move to the next one. And eventually, you can transform your system. But it is going to take time, and it is hard work. But we know that schools and districts can do it because we're seeing it happen, not only in North Carolina, but all across the country. And we want to see more of it happen.
Thank you. I'd like to build on that by shifting from what it looks like to what it takes to scale. And so based on your experience, I'd love for each of you to reflect on this. What is the single most important systems level shift that must happen for tailored learning to move from isolated programs to something that is sustainable and scalable, especially in high needs settings? And Rachel, we'll start with you.
Okay. So in thinking about this, and again, knowing that we're in year 1, really the thing, kind of the linchpin that I've identified is principal buy-in. And I say that because I've seen what happens when the principal is fully bought in and when he or she is not. We know that the principal's the culture setter of the school. And also, we know that the teachers and other staff are looking to that person to know what's important, what's valued. Is this just another initiative that's going to go away after a few months, or is this something that's going to be sustained that our principal, our leader, truly believes in? Something that we've heard from teachers, especially when we've had a little bit of resistance at the beginning, is, well, we tried something last year and then this will be gone in another year, And so what we've really seen is that when that principal is bought in and says, hey, I believe in this. This is why this is good for our kids. This is why we're doing this. I'm right here beside you. I'm going to create space for you to be able to do what you need to do in order to start making shifts towards tailored learning. That's where we've really seen some success. And the other piece of that, I think, is also giving principals in their buildings, kind of what Kayla was mentioning around autonomy. Like, it's not a one size fits all. So that principal knows what's going to work for his teachers, for the students within that school, and can leverage the teachers to get feedback on that. But one thing that we've done through the Golden Leaf Schools initiative is we give the principal the autonomy to decide how he or she will distribute teacher incentives. So there's some teacher incentives that come every year, and we've asked them to structure that in a way that works for them and their teachers, so that they can say, hey, I have this really great team of teachers that I'm going to ask to serve on our proficiency scale development team. And that's going to require them to stay, after school every other week for a few months. And as a result, I'm going to leverage my teacher incentives to pay those teachers extra for their time. We've had other principals that decide that I'm going to, after we've developed the scales, I'm going to pay teachers who are developing intervention resources and things like that to go along with the lessons. So giving them that autonomy as well, because the thing that the other big piece of this takes is time. Like, there needs to be the time, and teachers are already very overextended, and we ask a lot of them. So providing that principal with the flexibility, autonomy, and incentives to kind of motivate their teachers as well, I think is key.
Yeah. Kayla, same question to you.
Yeah, I would say when you look at the 4 areas from the framework, structure, culture, teaching and learning, probably culture is where the biggest one is. And I would say the reason is leadership. So what Rachel just said, the principal, the building level leader, the district level leader, the state level leader. I mean, you keep going up. The leaders are so important, but then you also have to have teacher leaders in the building. You have to have teachers who are empowered to take on that role of helping sustain the work, so that if the leader at the top changes, you have enough leaders in the group to keep the work going forward. We find that as soon as the complaints start to come in, right? The community's complaining, a parent comes, they go to the leader first, right? That's where they're going to go. They're going to see whose ear they can get. And if they can get their ear and they can keep them from moving the work forward, it can kind of derail all the work that's happening in the building or in the district. And that's what you don't want to happen. So you need to have that established culture of trust and communication, outreach, making sure your parents know what's happening. You're bringing them in the building. You're showing them what you're doing. You're letting them experience the processes that your students are going through, your teachers are going through. You're making it a whole community effort. Engage the community in the process themselves, right? If we want learning to be more real for the students, we need the community in the building. They need to come and say, yes, these are the things that are most important, because if we're going to hire you a few years down the road and you don't know how to do these things, you don't know how to collaborate, you don't know how to think critically, you don't know how to problem solve for yourself, we're not looking to hire you. We can't teach all of these things once you're already here. These are things you need to be learning and growing and building that foundation from early on. So you need to bring the community, bring your industry leaders in, let them be part of the work, and let them help be leaders, because then they can help. They're the parents, right? They're in the community. They can help people understand what's happening in our schools and what are we doing. They can continue to strengthen that leader and say, hey, we're going to come alongside you. We're going to provide internships. We're going to provide, come to our workspaces and see what it's like here. Bring your students on field trips. Let them learn how's math used in the real world? How's science used in the real world? How are we putting all these pieces together? We'll come in and help with your projects. You're doing project-based learning, we'll come help do a kickoff and show you what this is really like. So you have to build that culture where you have everybody on board and you're all working together, and that leadership piece is so key. Having a good leader in place, the leader who is going to drive that change. They're going to help you understand it takes time. They're going to keep encouraging along the way when you feel like, oh, we took 3 steps forward and then we had to take a step back, though. That's okay. It's a process. We're learning. We're doing this together. It's okay if every now and then we take a step back, because we're on the path together and we're going to do this together. And then empowering your teachers to be those next leaders, so that when they have the opportunity and when a leader does change, they just move right up and keep it going. That doesn't derail the system. It doesn't change the work you're doing. Everyone still knows and understands the value, the importance, why we're doing this in the first place, and it's able to just keep going. So I think that leadership and building that culture of we're in this together, you've got that buy-in and we can all do it. That's the biggest change that can make it happen and make it move forward, but it's also the biggest change that will stop the effort in its path.
Thank you. Angela, same question.
Sure. So, I'll start with ditto on the leadership side. Absolutely, you've got to have the leader of the school all in on the model and the philosophy. At the kind of tops down level, to be able to do this, right, we've got to start by removing the obstacles to competency-based credit earning, right? So decouple time from learning, and then if we can kind of get rid of or create that path from those bureaucratic, I would call it, obstacles, then you create the canvas. How do you create and sustain and scale principals and leaders and teachers that are going to proliferate this? I think the key is defining what we call a strong service model. So we have the benefit of 18 plus years of doing this. We work every day to determine what makes it better and how can we do this better for students. But the safeguards are really important, right? We cannot risk doing it wrong. So we pilot, we test, we share, strong collaboration between teachers, right? Teachers seeing themselves as an important part of the process, collaborating on what worked, what didn't, defining what that success is. So having strong models of outcomes, or tools for outcomes, I should say, so they can see, hey, this worked, this didn't, let's talk about it, let's document it. And then as we bring on these new teachers and these new leaders and these new kind of contributors to our system, they've got a roadmap that says, hey, here's what works, do it this way, and then we'll try some new things along the way, but we're going to do it very carefully with the safeguards that protect rigor.
Thank you, and thank you all three for all of your insights. We're going to transition now into audience question and answer. I think you guys have been through this once in the last session, but there's a mic runner, and so if you'll just raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you, and the panelists will take your questions.
Hi, I'm Tracy Bell. I'm from Durham Public Schools. I'm an itinerant resource teacher for students with visual impairments, also a national board facilitator team person for the district. I have a question concerning collaboration. The state of North Carolina has a pretty strong personalized learning kind of framework that's probably been in place since we tried to move from like the industrial age to more digital learning and also personalized learning for students. What kind of conversations are being had if personalized learning is not the ceiling but the pathway? What kind of conversations are we having to make sure that we are collaborating, working together, making sure folks can really wrap around terminology and doing it in a robust way? And I got a kind of question, a second question for Rachel. Is that what we are working towards in the schools, the Golden Leaf schools, maybe the personalized learning model that the state already has in place? Did that? I can't. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sure.
We'll let you go.
Okay,
I
go
can
ahead.
start, sure. So in terms of the first question, I think this is a perfect example of of what we're trying to do as a state. Appreciate Best NC always engaging multiple stakeholders around important education topics such as tailored learning, personalized learning. In the Golden Leaf Schools initiative, yes, to your question, this is serving as a pilot for what we hope to see in other schools and districts that we will be able to scale eventually. So it's a 5-year pilot, so we're giving ourselves plenty of time to document, learn, and the other really powerful thing that I appreciate about this initiative is if you look at our vision for the Golden Leaf Schools initiative, it's that our rural school districts will serve as models of innovation and success. So I think that's very powerful for me, coming from a rural community, that at the end of this, we're gonna have 20 schools that are models in our state for competency-based education and mastery-based learning, which is very powerful if you think about it. So.
Kayla, Angela, what about this this idea about having common definitions, frameworks? Because, few ideas are completely new. And so do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say, to your point with your question there, that the state has been trying to do some of this work for a little while now. It's not brand new, and some of, we can say tailored learning, we can say personalized learning, we can say competency-based. There's a lot of words out there. We've talked about kind of the alphabet soup of the acronyms. But I do think there's groundwork at that level, and there are folks who are trying to work together to how do we make this happen, and how do we message and communicate in a way that it doesn't feel too top down, like you're being forced to do something, but there's an option and a path, and you figure out what works for you. To Rachel's point, having pilots is a way that a lot of states have been able to successfully do this work, because they start small and they build something that others, oh, I want to try that. What's going on over here? And then you can add a little bit more, and then you can add, and so it kind of grows from that way. When you start to see it in action and see what's happening, that's a great way to build and a great way to bring folks together. A lot of times if a school leader decides, hey, I just want to do something new and different in my building, you feel very isolated in that work. Like you can't call the principal next door, they're not doing the same thing. You don't have anybody at the district necessarily that asks you to do this. You feel like you're kind of working in your own little bubble here. So I think when you have pilot groups where you can connect, okay, here's a few leaders that we bring together. Through the work that I do, we have a CBE partnership for North Carolina. So we're trying to bring together folks who are wanting to do the work, some folks who are in the middle of the work, where they can share ideas and say, oh, here's a lesson that we learned, you need to do this, or if you haven't tried this, maybe try this, or really self-evaluate, look at where you are and see where you can start. So I think just kind of building on where you see pockets of success, then how can we grow that, and how can we kind of create like ambassadors for the work across the state who will build it up. I think the state level Portrait of a Graduate work and the resources that they've rolled out there are kind of getting folks to think differently, competencies, and how we're helping students to be successful after K-12. And also the future ready skills work would be another one, where just thinking about, okay, what happens after you leave K-12 education in North Carolina? Are our students ready? Can they go into careers? Can they go into careers of the future that we might not even know that exist right now, but they will be there when our kindergartners graduate in several years? So just kind of connecting all the dots. Make sure you as the principal, reach out to others, work with them. When you have those small pilots, share the work. Don't keep it hidden. Good or bad, share the work so that others can learn from it, and then you can start to build and grow that pilot till you have more and more involved. And then just look at what's available from the state level. What are resources and things that we can use just to get started, just to give us a taste of what it could look like to be different.
I would just add too that the opportunity you have when you think about personalized learning for students, right? It's got to start with personalized learning for teachers. What a beautiful opportunity we have to model what it should look like in our classroom by having our leaders doing it with our teachers. And we talked about this a little bit in the green room on just our vision for teacher colleges and teacher education, recognizing that it's not all stand and deliver. There's so many other beautiful ways for students to demonstrate competency. So I think creating models where those personal, the PLCs and the we call them data chats. Our leaders are sitting with our teachers every week going through the service model. How do we do this? How do we do it well? What is the data showing? And then we talk about every student. And so we're modeling what that looks like for our teachers in our classrooms as well.
Question over here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can we wait for our microphone?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you've got it. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Were you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Mansell Spencer from Cumberland County Schools, and shifting to a tailored learning model is going to take some time and some effort. With the current state that we have with the school accountability model, do you think there's also a shift that's going to have to happen there in order for schools to be graded properly once they make this transition, so that they are actually awarded for the proficiency or the growth that students are making?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, and of course, I'm coming from the lens of alternative education, so students, who are coming in typically severely behind their cohort students, and we had to do some really, and we're able to do some really meaningful work on what should accountability look like. And I would contend that, just that constant whole-scale look at how do we think about holding schools accountable for success. So what does that look like? And just the exam at the end of the year as a final summative assessment typically isn't always going to be the best reflection.
Yeah.
I would also say yes. That's been one of the hard conversations we've had to have in our cohort, especially with our cohort of low-performing schools, is there's been a lot of angst about, of course, when you're implementing something new, we as educators, we understand implementation science, and there might be a bit of a dip when we first start something, but because of the way the accountability system is set up, the community, parents, even our teachers, principals, they know that at the end of the day, the perception is based on that letter grade that they get, based on accountability scores, and sometimes that doesn't support innovation. It makes people scared to innovate, is kind of a lesson that I've learned, because they say, well, I need to, like, we've been low performing for 5 years and I want to do something different, but I'm scared to do something different because I know doing something different may cause an initial dip, or it may cause some of my teachers to leave. So I think that's been, it's challenging. And I think when we're doing mastery-based learning or tailored learning, the accountability system will and should change to accommodate that and accommodate that innovation.
Yeah, agreed. It's that structure and culture at all levels. So making sure that not only if you're trying to do something new in your school, and you have the right structure and the right culture in place, that your school community is okay with knowing and understanding what this means, and that if we're doing something different, we may see change. It might take a while for it to be positive, but rolling that up so that the district is also understanding at the state level. But then, yes, then what are those true policy drivers that have to change to really say, okay, if we're looking at how we assess our students differently, how we train our teachers, and how we assess our teachers, like all the things have to change, and that includes that accountability model for schools. So yes, I think to see true transformation and really open it up so folks are comfortable with making that change, we'll have to get there.
So consensus from the stage on yes, and I just want to call out that these are conversations that we're having at the state level now. The State Board of Education has convened a task force to have these conversations.
That's great.
You've got a question over here.
Hi, I'm Kim Mackey. I'm actually a member of that task force, and I've heard a lot about what we shouldn't be doing and what it shouldn't look like, and definitely with you. But from a pragmatic perspective, what would a statewide assessment system look like that you think would be conducive to this change?
Good question.
I guess a simple, quick response would be to consider short cycle formative, right? So measuring along the way. And I'll just kind of back up to be clear that accountability is really important. And I don't think that we need to be abandoning it by any means. It's just, how does it evolve as the system evolves and as best practices evolve? But yeah, perhaps short cycle assessments that are looking at that incremental progress throughout. And then, of course, in our world, again, in the alternative education space, we enjoy the opportunity of being able to define what are the learning and student outcomes that match the mission. And I know that that's not a one size fits all, but I think that's something to consider as we even think about kind of broader systems.
I also think you want to look more at performance and not just one standardized type test, but what are the different performance-based assessments that you can use and put in place. There are other states that have tried a couple of different things with more, having to present to an audience, having to create a video and use that to demonstrate the particular skill or the standard that you're trying to show, but giving students more options to show that they can do the work. Sitting down, memorizing, bubbling in a test is one way, yes, but there are other ways that may work better for other students. So I think making sure that there is flexibility in the system to help the student. So that if I go to take the same test however many times and I just can't do it, but then you sit down and have a conversation with me and I can explain the whole 9th grade, science standards, front to back, everything you needed to know, but I can't pass it on the test, but I can tell you how to do it. Then how do we give students those opportunities to show what they know in the way that they know how to show it? and then how do we give them those credits? So it takes hard work. It takes really thinking about a different way and understanding that it's not going to look the same for all students and it's not going to happen at the same time. The time bounds are, I think, one of the things that really holds up a lot of what we're set. Well, we have to do this, and then this time is when we do this, and then we'll do this, and then this time is when we do that. We have to kind of break that mold and know that it's over time. It's more small chunks of, okay, get to this part, show me what you know. Get to this part, show me what you know. Keep moving forward, build on what you learn, and don't keep going if you didn't show me what you know here, right? That's not gonna help you if I just push you along and push you forward and don't give you the chance to truly show that you know this, you've got the foundation before you move on. So I think it's just, it really takes some outside the box thinking of how else can we give students options and opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge that works really well for them, but that we all can accept and be like, oh yeah, you've got this. You're good to move on. There's no reason to hold you back because you couldn't pass the same test as the student next to you when you could clearly demonstrate your knowledge in this area. So it's not an easy way to do it, but it takes a lot of thought and a lot of, outside the box.
And the only thing I'll kind of add is, I think one area that we can look to that already exists that's doing some, I don't want to call it standardized necessarily, but it is a bit standardized of the performance-based typed assessments is career and technical education. So that's a good example to look at. And of course, in some instances, that makes a lot more sense that they do those performance-based assessments based on the content that's being taught in some of those courses. But that's a place where we can look for our more traditional core areas as well for a way that we could potentially restructure some assessment.
Hey, good morning. Kevin Baston from UNC Chapel Hill. Curious about how you've seen community colleges and universities sort of brought into this conversation, right? Because I can picture a world in which this can work in a K-12 space, and then yet some, not all of those K-12 graduates are going to go off to different types of higher education. And how do the systems we've built about Carnegie credits and everything else exist in that world? So just insights into sort of that transition and their role there being higher education, their role in sort of this conversation as well.
I can try, jump in. So in a previous iteration of the work that I've been doing, we did include higher ed in our conversation. So we had someone from community college at the table and someone from the university system at the table to talk about kind of what that transition would look like. So if students are changing the way they learn in K-12, what does that look like higher ed? What we learned from some of that conversation is that a lot of the change is already happening at the higher ed level. You have a lot of classes in higher ed that work on more of a competency model where it's almost pass-fail. Either you got it or you didn't, and you move on or you don't move on. You have a lot of things where you don't have as many standard assessments throughout the way. You have one like speech. That's it. That's your performance. You accomplish that, you're done, you move on. A lot of, in the medical world, a lot of things that we found in nursing, medical, different areas in education for medicine, a lot of them have moved to a competency-based model where they, because that's what you want. You want the surgeon who can do the surgery, not the one who got it one day but not the next day and did okay tomorrow, right? Like you want the one who can do it and do it well, and they can show you that they can do it well. That's who you want doing your surgery. So there are instances in higher ed, they're already making that change, and what they're waiting on is K-12 to catch up. And we don't want that to be what holds us up. And K-12 will sometimes say, well, then our students are not going to be ready for higher ed. So when my seniors, if they're not on the honor roll and we can't show that they have over a 4.0, then how are they going to get into college? Well, go to the colleges and ask them. You take students from all over the country, international students, homeschool students, charter school students, private school students, all these, they all have different transcripts, right? They all have different, none of them all have the same A through F, 4.0 scale. So there are ways that you can fully prepare your K-12 students to go straight in, be more prepared probably than some of their peers. If they have built those foundations, they have those portrait of a graduate type competencies, they're ready to go, they've demonstrated their learning all along the way, they're going to be set up for success in higher ed. And then hopefully they have those opportunities in higher ed to continue learning in the same way, and they don't feel like that they're going backwards. So I do think the point earlier about collaboration, it does take collaboration from K-12 and your higher ed systems to kind of talk with one another. As we move students forward, we're setting them up for success to graduate and go into the real world. That includes university and continued learning. So how are we putting those pieces together so that students continue learning and growing and building that knowledge, and then they're truly ready for whatever comes after academic, and then that they can turn that into how they're better serving students from top or bottom top as they go through the system.
Yeah, I'll echo the same, just really thoughtful, that articulation, right? Ensuring that everything that we're doing, it might look a little bit different in their high school setting, but we are still preparing them for success and what comes next, regardless of what that might look like, be it military, college, career, and technical. So making sure that there's good alignment on the skills needed to be successful there. But I would love to see more collaboration in terms of teacher preparation. When we're working with colleges and universities, right? Again, a lot of times we have our newer teachers come in kind of very rigid in this is the way that we teach and learn. And if we had kind of more of an emphasis on there's a whole lot of ways that education can look and different models, and if schools like ours can actually be, as I'd call it, kind of teaching colleges, right, can be the place where they can practice those skills, I think that'd be pretty phenomenal.
Can I ask one more question? Yeah, please. We've got time for one last question.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just back to the gentleman's point about the whole structure of the system itself. Do you ladies feel, thank you, thanks, John. Do you ladies feel pretty confident that the system itself will pivot? I hate to overuse that term. Are you optimistic that the system can take tailored learning and quickly absorb what it will be at some point? Are you pretty hopeful about that?
Yes, I am. And I just think it's because when we've been able to provide the training and coaching to our educators in the pilot that we're doing through Golden Leaf Schools, the educators love, like, they are like, oh my gosh, where has this been my whole life? Like this, it's something I think that is good for kids and good for student outcomes. And if you're talking to a teacher, that's why they're in the job. At least I hope so. So I feel like from what I've seen, yes, the system is ready, and I believe the system will pivot. And I think this is the way we need to go, because we have to stop teaching to the middle, because we have kids that we're leaving behind that are below, and we're leaving kids behind and that are above the proficiency level. And we have to serve the spectrum of the kids. We have to stop teaching just to the average.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the outcomes are showing it. So, if you can demonstrate it's working, I think that our system's going to follow.
Kayla, last word to you.
Yeah, so agree with what they said. Just building to show this is what's best for students. And when you get to the educators, you see the excitement, you see how much they want to change. I was in a school on Friday, and educator almost in tears because she was so excited about what she was going to do, but it was like, I just don't know how to make it happen, and I want to do it on Monday, and I want to do this. It was just so excited because of everything that she was learning, and like knowing she had the student that just needed something different. And she had that breakthrough moment and knew, okay, if we do this, I've got that student. They're going to succeed. They're going to be able to graduate. I have done my job as a teacher, right? So when you see that excitement and you can build and just continue, I think you will see others be like, oh, okay, what's happening there? We need that to happen here, and we need it to grow. We need the whole state to do it, and then other states, and we need the whole country. Like, everyone needs to do this. It is what's best for students. It's how we're all gonna learn. It's how we're all going to be successful, but we gotta do what's right for the student.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you all for your questions. And will you please join me in thanking our panelists?